The sky above the town of Dry Willow was the color of old bone, and the wind carried no mercy, only dust and the taste of rust. It moved across the empty plains like a memory no one dared speak aloud. Every shutter creaked, every dog barked without meaning, and at the edge of that tired little town, a platform had been hammered into the dirt, crooked as sin. Waiting for a body that shouldn't be for sale, she came walking up the main road barefoot. Not because she'd lost her boots, but because she'd sold them the day before, traded them for a bottle of milk that had gone sour before she'd even opened it. The child in her arms didn't cry. He was too tired, too used to the world being colder than a crib ever should be. Her dress, once pale blue, was now the color of sorrow, stiff with dust and stiff with judgment. Her hair stuck to her cheek. She held her baby close, swaddled in a torn blanket. One arm beneath and one over, like she was holding onto a future everyone else had given up on. Her face didn't plead, didn't tremble, but her eyes were carved deep with something that made men look away, and women turn their heads like they'd seen something shameful. The auction yard was a rotting patch of earth behind the saloon, half-fenced and crowded with men who smelled of whiskey horses, and the kind of work that leaves hands calloused and hearts closed. The sheriff stood near the platform, arms crossed, chin up like he was watching a storm come in, and didn't care if it blew the town away. The saloon owner leaned in the shadows, smirking like he'd just won something in a game no one else had been allowed to play. They said her husband died in a card game, that he owed the town. That debt, in a place like this, could be passed down like eye color or a scar. When she'd asked where they'd buried him, the sheriff had only said cards were fair. And when she'd asked what would happen to her and the boy, the saloon owner grinned and said, auctions at noon. The heat pressed down on her like a hand. The baby whimpered and she shifted him to her other arm. No one offered her water. No one offered her shade. Except one soul, an old woman near the stalls, kneeling over a basket of stale biscuits. Her name was Maud, though few used it. That child looks like he's swallowed dust, she murmured, handing over a torn strip of linen. Wrap his mouth. Keep the wind from bruising his lips. The girl nodded, wordless, and moved on. She took the wooden steps up onto the platform, didn't stumble, didn't sway. Just stood there like a ghost refusing to fade. The auctioneer was a thick man with a voice too, loud for a funeral and too slick for a church. He clapped his hands and called for silence, though no one had been speaking. They were all just watching, like wolves circling something they didn't need, but wanted anyway. Now ain't she a thing? The auctioneer shouted, grinning. Young, strong, fertile, comes with a babe, clean and quiet. Package deal, the crowd murmured. Boots shifted, coins clinked in palms. A man near the front laughed and muttered something about second-hand wives. Another spat tobacco at the base of the platform. Opening bid, the auctioneer called. $5 a hand went up. It was the saloon owner's nephew, a thick-necked brute with grease on his vest and cruelty behind his teeth. 10, he barked, for both. Someone else chuckled. That boy ain't mine. I don't pay for babies. 15, the nephew snapped, louder now. She's mine. Debt cleared. We're done here. The girl gripped her child tighter. Knuckles white. She said nothing. Her lips were cracked. Her back was straight. A younger man at the edge of the platform, Deputy Rafe, looked away. He was new to town, still carried guilt like it might count for something. His hand hovered near the butt of his gun, but he didn't draw it, didn't speak, just swallowed hard and looked at the dirt like it might answer him. The auctioneer laughed. No other bids? 15, going once. The baby whimpered. Not loud, but enough to hush the crowd. Enough to remind them that this wasn't a cow or a saddle. It was a life. 2 of them, but no one stepped forward, going twice. The saloon owner lit a cigar. His nephew grinned, ready stepping forward. Sold the word hadn't finished leaving his mouth before it happened. A sound slow and deep rolled over the horizon like thunder without clouds. Hoofbeats, not many. Just one, steady. Measured, like the horse didn't fear where it was going. Like the man riding it had already decided what he'd do when he got there. Heads turned, eyes narrowed, rose from the far end of the road. The shape came into view, long coat, wide hat, horse black as coal, and just as cold. The auctioneer squinted. What in hell? No one spoke. The man didn't hurry, didn't slow. It straight up to the yard like he was born in this. Durton had never left it. He dismounted without a word, tied the reins to the post, walked forward. He didn't look at the crowd, didn't nod, didn't blink. His eyes moved once to the platform, to the girl, to the child, and then he spoke, quiet as dusk. She's not for sale. The auctioneer raised a brow. Oh, you gonna tell the law that? The man reached into his coat. The crowd stiffened, thought it might be a gun. But what came out was a leather pouch. Heavy. It landed on the wooden platform with a thud that sounded like finality. Her debts. Paid, he said, and then some. The saloon owner stepped forward. You her kin? No, and you got no claim. I'm his brother, the man said. And the words dropped like stones in a well. Silence. Someone muttered, dead man never said he had a brother. The saloon owner's face twisted. That boy owed half this town, the man's voice. Didn't rise, and now he doesn't. He turned to the girl. Finally really looked at her, not like a thing, not like a prize, but like someone who'd seen grief and still stood anyway. You coming? He asked. She stared at him. The wind caught her hair, blew it back from her face. Her lips parted. No. She looked at the child, then the crowd, then the man. She didn't speak. She just stepped down from the platform, barefoot still, and walked toward him like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't afraid to breathe again. And as they turned toward the road, the hoof prints behind them, already fading into dust, no one noticed the man on the ridge above the town, rifle resting across his knees, watching, waiting, because not every man who rides in brings peace. Some come to finish what others started. They rode out of Dry Willow in silence, leaving behind the wooden platform where she'd nearly been sold, and the crowd that had watched it happen without blinking. The sky above them had turned copper now, brushed with streaks of lavender. Like evening was trying to make peace with a cruel day. The dust from his horse stirred softly beneath them, whispering their passing into the wind. She followed on foot, cradling the baby tight against her shoulder. The child had fallen asleep at last, his body limp with trust, his breath warm against her neck. But she didn't trust easily, not anymore, and not the man in front of her. He didn't speak, not to her, not to the road, just rode slow and steady, like a man walking beside something old and sacred. His coat flared with the breeze. His hat shadowed his face. Didn't once turn around to check if she was keeping up. He seemed to know she would. She'd never seen him before, not at the funeral if there was one, not in the weeks after. The man her husband had been was all noise and fists and gambling breath, but this man, he moved like stillness itself, like something carved from canyon rock and long forgotten. By the time they reached a dip in the hills, night was folding gently over the land. He stopped beside a low grove of scrub trees and dismounted without a word. She stayed standing, her legs trembling, not from fear, but from the long holding in of everything: breath, tears, trust. He built a fire. Not big, just enough to chase the chill. He pulled out a blanket from his saddle roll and laid it across a flat patch of earth near the flames. Then he poured water into a small tin cup and set it near her feet before tending to the horse. Not once did he ask her name. Not once did he try to touch her or even offer his own. Still, when she looked at him, truly looked, something inside her eased. Just a notch. She knelt and placed the baby down gently on the blanket. He stirred but didn't wake. Shh. She sat beside him, arms wrapped around her knees, unsure of what to say. You, his kin. She asked at last, her voice raw from wind and silence. The man didn't answer at first. He was whittling a piece of dry cedar, not looking at her. His jaw was rough with a day's worth of dust and stubble, and his eyes seemed fixed far beyond the firelight. Blood, he said finally. That boy's got some of mine. That makes it matter. She hesitated. But you didn't come before." "I didn't know him," the man said, setting the stick aside. "I owe you," she blinked. Why, he didn't answer that. Instead, he stood and walked toward the fire, pulled out a small tin of salve. "And a water jug?" "Your feet," he said. She looked down at them, blistered, split, caked in dry mud and blood. She'd stopped feeling the pain hours ago. "You don't have to," she whispered. "I know," he said, already kneeling. He poured the water gently, not flinching when the dirt ran red. Then he cleaned the wounds with the slow care of someone tending to something delicate. His hands were rough, but his touch wasn't. She watched him, stunned by the quiet of it. No words, no pity, just presence. "Who are you?" she asked. He tied a strip of clean cloth around her ankle and met her eyes for the first time that night. "Name don't matter out here," he said, "but I'm not like him." She nodded once, then looked down at her sleeping child. The fire crackled. Somewhere nearby, an owl called into the night. Later, he lay down across from her on the other side of the fire, arms behind his head, eyes half closed. She couldn't sleep, not yet. So she sat and watched the shadows dance across the canyon walls. "You came in like a ghost," she said softly. He didn't open his eyes. "Maybe I was." She leaned back against a stone and let her head tilt toward the stars. Her bones ached. But there was something strange, something terrifying in the way her heart had begun to stop trembling. He stayed up all night, even after she finally dozed off. When the baby stirred, he got up and placed more wood on the fire. When dawn broke pale and silver, she found a cup of warm tea beside her and the fire still alive. They traveled by horse that day. He offered his saddle to her without asking, walked alongside, guiding the reins. She didn't argue. Her legs wouldn't carry her much further. She watched him as they moved. He rarely looked back, but his every step felt like it was placed not for himself, but for her safety. Around noon, they stopped at a small stream. He lifted the baby from her arms while she washed her face. She watched him holding the child, awkward but careful, like he'd never held something so breakable before, but knew he wanted to get it right. "You don't even know us," she said, wringing out her scarf. "I know what I saw," he replied. "And what's that?" "A woman they tried to sell, and a town that let it happen." He handed the baby back, and for a moment, their hands brushed. It was nothing, but it was also everything. That night, he made camp in the canyon pass, tall cliffs on either side. The stars above, thin and white like bone needles. He built the fire again, gave her his coat to sleep under, said nothing when she offered to help. She sat close this time, not across from him, and when he handed her a small biscuit from his saddlebag, she smiled. It was the first time she'd done that in months. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Safe," he said. "And after that, wherever you want to go." She looked into the fire for a long while, letting the weight of those words settle. It wasn't romance. Not yet it wasn't trust. It was the first brick in a wall. She thought she'd never build again. He didn't speak much, but when he did, the words stayed with her. "You ain't broken," he said once, "just bent by the wind." And though she didn't answer, her fingers curled slightly over his coat as she fell asleep. But as the fire flickered low, far above the canyon, another pair of eyes watched from a ridge. A glint of glass caught the starlight. A rifle barrel, resting steady. The man watching didn't blink, didn't move, just waited because there were some who still believed she belonged to them, and they weren't done yet. The cabin sat low in the crook of the canyon, made of stone the same color as the cliffs that guarded it. It didn't look like much at first glance. Small porch, crooked door, tin chimney, but it breathed like something alive. A place with memory in the walls and solitude in its bones. Somewhere the world had stopped knocking a long time ago. Wild horses wandered nearby, their hooves soft on the riverbank. The air smelled of juniper and old wood smoke. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, the woman didn't wake with fear. Chasing her heartbeat, "The wind here didn't bite," he whispered. She stepped off the horse stiffly, her arms cradling the baby close. The man had said little on the journey, just pointed ahead and said, "Home." She hadn't known what to expect. This wasn't wealth. It wasn't safety wrapped in iron or men with rifles. This was something simpler. He didn't wait for thanks. Just unsaddled the horse and carried the packs inside. She followed, hesitant. The inside of the cabin was cool and quiet. A narrow bed tucked against the wall. A hearth that still held the ghost of old fire. Books stacked in uneven towers. Pair of boots by the door that had never seen a polished rag. This wasn't the house of a man hiding. This was the house of a man who had stopped expecting company. That night, he cooked. Badly, the beans were scorched on one side and the biscuits never rose. She chewed carefully, lips twitching. He noticed her expression. He shrugged and said, "I'm better with jerky." She laughed. Just once. It's just a small thing, like a bird startled from the grass. He froze, then smiled. That was the first thing they shared. Later, by candlelight. He pulled out a leather journal. The pages were yellow, filled with handwriting tight as thread. "My father wrote this," he said. "Every spring, about the land, the horses. My brother never cared. I used to read it to feel closer to someone who wasn't cruel." She listened. The baby dozed in her lap. The flame danced between them. "You left?" She asked quietly. He nodded, eyes not on her. He hurt people. Took what he wanted. When I tried to stop him, he said blood made him right. So I walked. Didn't come back. Not until I heard he'd died. "You feel guilty?" she asked. He met her gaze. "Every day." She nodded slowly. "You're not the only one carrying ghosts." They didn't speak again for a while. The fire crackled. She watched his hands as he turned the pages. Hands that had built things, broken things, maybe healed. A few, in the days that followed, routine began to find them. He carved wood in the mornings. She washed clothes down by the river. The baby gurgled and reached for shadows on the wall. Nothing felt certain, but nothing felt cruel either. One afternoon, she found a cradle on the porch. Rough cedar, shaped gently, lined with soft fabric. He never mentioned it. She kept chopping wood. That night, she laid the baby inside and touched the edge of the cradle like it might disappear. The next morning, she noticed his coat, the one with the torn lining, folded neatly by the hearth, stitched carefully. A patch over the shoulder. Neither of them said a word. Sometimes. She danced. When the baby was calm and the moon hung full over the canyon, she'd hum under her breath and sway barefoot across the porch boards. A slow rhythm only she could hear. Once, when she turned, she saw him leaning in the doorway, watching. He didn't speak, didn't move. He just let her be, and something in her cracked, not in pain, in release. One evening, the child cried through supper. She tried everything, cradling, feeding, singing. She stood outside on the porch, near tears. The man came out, reached for the baby, and without a word, held him close. The crying eased. His hand rested on the small of the baby's back, slow and steady. A kind of magic. She watched, her breath caught in her throat. That night, she fell asleep on the swing. When she woke, the baby was gone. She panicked until she saw the fire lit inside and the man asleep on the floor, curled near the cradle. She was in the bed, wrapped in his old coat. The baby lay beside her, sleeping sound, and for the first time in a long while. She didn't cry herself to sleep. The days folded into each other. The quiet between them wasn't empty. It was full of things they hadn't dared to say. She found herself watching his hands, listening to his footsteps. Her body didn't flinch when he moved behind her. One morning, while passing him a bowl of oats, her fingers brushed his. She didn't mean to, but didn't pull away either. He paused. She looked up, their eyes held. Then she let go. It was enough. For now. But something had shifted. That afternoon, the baby sat on the floor playing with scraps of cloth. He babbled, then stilled, looked up, reached out. Once said it, "Pa." Her heart stopped. The man froze. The word echoed in the silence like a bell. She picked up the baby, her hands shaking. Her face broke. Not with joy, but with something tangled, deep. I'm not ready, she whispered, half to herself. Then she ran out the door, past the porch, down toward the river where the willow trees bent over the banks, like they were listening. She stayed there until the moon rose. He didn't follow. Not right away. When she returned, the cradle was rocking. Gently. He sat in the chair by the hearth, eyes on the fire. She didn't speak, just knelt beside the baby and held him. Neither of them said the name again. That night, the air was too still. The wind had stopped whispering. A silence fell over the canyon. That didn't belong. Then the creak of a window hinged, the shift of a door not latched. She sat up, alert. The man was already on his feet, gun drawn. He moved to the door slowly, like an animal smelling danger. Outside, boot prints in the dirt, fresh, wide, to many. And in the distance, just beyond the trees, flicker of light. They weren't alone anymore. Someone had come to take her back, and they weren't knocking. The night held its breath, no wind, no coyote call. Just the hush that comes when something terrible has crossed the line between waiting and happening. He stood by the window, still as stone, watching shadows stretch across the yard. 5 horses, 5 riders, torches in hand, rifles slung across backs. Men from the saloon, and one in particular she recognized even in the dark, the nephew. Face gleaming with sweat and vengeance, she clutched the baby to her chest and whispered, "The man's name." He turned to her, eyes unreadable. "They'll burn it," she said. "They'll kill you." He didn't blink. Just reached for the hidden door behind the hearth, a narrow crawl space leading beneath the cabin. "You and the child go. Stay quiet. No matter what happens, don't come out." Her knees shook. "You can't take them alone." "I don't need to win," he said. "Just need to stand." She tried to grab his arm. "Please, don't do this." For the first time since she'd known him, he touched her. His hand cupped her face, calloused, warm, reverent. "I couldn't save anyone before," he whispered, "but I'll save you." And in his voice, she heard a lifetime of silence breaking. She stepped. Back nodded. Crawled into the cellar, heart breaking at every inch of distance. The baby stirred, sensing something ancient in the air. Fear, courage. It's the kind of stillness that comes before a man chooses whether he lives or dies for something worth it. Then the trapdoor closed. Above, boots thundered against earth. He stepped. Out onto the porch, rifle in hand, back straight, coat open to show no armor, just a man, just one. The torches burned like small suns. Shadows danced across the faces of the 5. One of them laughed. "Figured you were dead," the nephew said, spitting to the side. "Looks like we got unfinished business." The man said nothing. "You're protecting something that don't belong to you?" the nephew growled. "A debt don't wash with a bag of coins." The man lifted his rifle slowly, deliberately, but he didn't shoot. He waited, like always. The wind returned. Just enough to move the grass. One of the men younger, trembling, dropped his weapon. "I didn't sign up for this," he said. "Heard what your brother did to her? I ain't that man."
Ow.
He turned and rode off into the dark. The others didn't flinch. The fight started with a crack, a shot that missed. A rush toward cover. The nephew cursed, hiding behind the water. Trough. One of his men fell to the ground, clutching his leg. The man didn't fire again immediately. He moved with patience, like someone who knew death well enough not to chase it. He ducked behind the porch rail, fired once more, hitting a torch clean. From a hand in the cellar, she covered the baby's ears. Her breath came in short gasps, heart beating against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She could hear boots stomping, voices shouting, wood splintering, and then silence. She couldn't bear it. She climbed out, pushed open the trapdoor, stepped into the smoke and ash, what had almost been ruin, and stood on the porch, the baby in her. Arms, her hair tangled, face streaked with dust and tears, but her spine straightened. She walked into the open, barefoot still, like the first day in Dry Willow. But now she wasn't bowed. She was blazing. "You can't have him," she said, voice clear, cutting through smoke. "You can't have us." The nephew raised his weapon, rage in his blood, but the man stood first, gun aimed steady. "You'll die for her?" The nephew spat. "No," the man replied. "I'll live." The shot that followed didn't come from the nephew. It came from the ridge. A single rifle crack. The nephew staggered, dropped from above. A figure on horseback turned and rode off, face unseen. She ran to him, the man. He was on one knee, blood on his sleeve. She dropped beside him, pressed her hand to the wound. "Why?" He looked at her, pain making his words shake. "Because you were the only thing I saw." That didn't turn away. She kissed his forehead. He winced, not from the kiss, but from what it meant. They sat together while dawn broke. The baby asleep in her arms. The last surviving man wounded, scared, tried to crawl away. Something slipped from his pocket. She picked it up. A badge, Dry Willow's sheriff. The truth dropped between them like a stone. Backed by law. Sold by law. Hurt by the hands meant to protect. They burned the bodies, washed the blood, buried the silence. Later that day by the river, she sat beside him as he rested, arm in a sling. The light was soft, almost apologetic. He stared at the water. "I thought I didn't have anything left in me to care," he said. "But you were never what was broken." She reached for his hand, held it. "You didn't save me," she said. "You stood beside me. That's different." He nodded. "DIDN single quotes. T speak." Didn't need to. The porch cradle rocked gently in the wind. The baby dreamed. And on that same porch, two people sat shoulder to shoulder. No longer strangers, no longer surviving, but starting. It's just starting to live. The sky above them turned violet, a soft, aching color, like something healing. And if you listened close, the canyon didn't echo gunshots anymore. It echoed breath, hope, a beginning. Sometimes it ain't the gun that saves a soul. Sometimes it's the man who dares to stay. And the woman who lets herself be seen, not as damaged, but as worth loving again.